Welcome all you dudes, nerds, and space cadets out there. I'm Lynn from Finds of Yesterday, and today we're talking about items from the 1980s that you can resell in your business. So hopefully this visual will give you an idea of what items to pick from the 1980s that you can put into your reselling business to make decent or good money. So take a chill pill and let's jump right in. We're talking the 1980s. If you lived through the 1980s, you probably have a good idea of what it was like. But if you didn't, then we're going to pop some pictures up here to help you. I was a teenager back then. Don't do the math. And I remember it quite vividly. But there was a group called the Memphis Group that got together, and they were a group of architects and designers that decided they were sick and tired of the 70s dull colors of browns and oranges and yellows, that they wanted something big and bright and pretty and bold. And so they created the color scheme for the decade of the 1980s. Now we're talking bright colors of like seafoam green and pinks and like turquoise and purples, not dark colors, but bright colors, almost like a pastel yet bright, if that makes sense. Like in pop art, that was popular with Andy Warhol, his pop art, he used a lot of them bright, bold colors. So what did we get out of that? A punch of color, that's for sure. And the patterns that they used, I'm going to put some geometric shaped items that up here that was used on so many items. So the patterns that they used were big, bold patterns like your tropical prints, big, bold leaves. Think of the Golden Girls in their bed, that one bedroom they had. It was all tropical green leaves on a bedspread with curtains that matched. And then when you picture kitchen stuff, I'm thinking of ducks and ribbons and hearts and on sweaters and clothes and things like that. There was so many bright colors and bright patterns. So everything was supposed to be pretty back then. And if you picture some of the sweaters that have hearts on them, ribbons, and the ducks with the ribbons, that type of thing. So I'll pop some pictures up. Hopefully it'll help. And then in home decor, we had lucite furniture. Remember the hard, clear lucite furniture and the black lacquer dressers and bedroom sets? Laura Ashley floral bedding was popular back then because she used a lot of floral prints. Talking floral on the curtains, floral on the bedspreads, on in the rugs, on the lampshades. It was everywhere. Wallpaper even. And they used teal carpeting, if you remember that. And then what types of materials did they use in their furniture and wall hanging type items? Brass. That was the biggest metal that they used. If you picture the brass birds flying across your wall, then you're thinking the 1980s because that was popular. A lot of brass items. Homeco was a popular one that used a lot of brass, and they would use brass frames around mirrors. Then you got your novelty items that they would use on end tables, like Garfield phones. They had a lot of different types of novelty phones, and Garfield was one of them, and he's actually a good resale item right now. I'll pop a picture up of him, and they had Alf had a phone, and Roxanne, which is a neon colored, it had neon, like a neon stripe around it, and I'll see if I can find a picture of that for you, and it sells pretty well too. Then we had cassette tape players, and the big boom boxes. The boom boxes are going to be hard to ship now, but you can find cassette players probably fairly reasonable, and you can resell them pretty well too. Just look up your items before purchasing them. Neon lights hanging on the walls if in every restaurant. Pink flamingos was part of the tropical scenes that we've seen, so anything pink flamingo sells well. Maybe not real high priced, but it does sell. Laminate countertops was popular. Overstuffed couches, which you probably still have an overstuffed couch in your living room. And arched windows. Just even in the home decor, they used arches a lot. Then we have clothing and hairstyles and the designer fashion end of things, where high hairdos were so popular. We would sit in front of the mirror and tease our hair every morning, and it was a big thing back then. So remember the Valley Girls and how preppy they were, and the guys, they'd all have polo tops that they used that were, they'd prop the collar up, so they were the preppy boys. And the men even had high hairdos like mohawks and like mullets. They were long in the back and short on top, short around the sides. And then fringed leather coats, like this one is from the 1980s. I also had one of these that was white and had teal on it, I think. I sold that for about $100. And this one is for sale right now. I don't think it's as much. I think it's, I don't remember. It's 70s probably. It's got the puffy shoulders and it tapers down so small at the waist. And I don't know how people could fit in that. I certainly can't. It's double-breasted snaps, and I can't snap it tight at all. They had, I mean, the shoulders are this big, and they go down to a waist that's like this. So that's the style back then, and the coats are short, so they were cropped coats. Then we had sweatbands and spandex, and me and my one friend had parachute pants, if you remember them. They didn't last very long, maybe a short period of time during the 80s. We had them, they're black, tight pants that were slick that you would have to zip up on the bottom just to get your feet in. And color block jackets and sweaters were really popular. So when they say color block, they mean blocks of color around. So like this whole section up on top might be purple, and this might be green and yellow, and just big, bright, bold colors. That was a popular fashion statement back then, and they sell well right now. Then again, polo tops are popular in light blue eyeshadow. All right, going on to dishware and cookware. So Corningware is probably the most popular item from back then, and Spice of Life pattern is one of the biggest patterns that I remember, and I'll pop that picture up. And Corel and Tupperware. Tupperware was yellow gold and orange and brown back in the 70s, and that all changed in the 80s. It became more blues and clears and tans. They did some of their cookware really sells for a decent amount of money. So if you ever see them out and about, you might want to pick them up or look them up first. Then we had Revereware, Farberware, and that's all cookware. And Alf cookie jars and Cookie Monster cookie jars. That's another good one to find if you see them. There's different variations of them, and they sell for probably $50, $60. Then we have games, which there's such a wide variety of games and toys that we can go over, but I'm going to cover some of the popular ones. And the Rubik's Cube, it's a pretty decent one to resell, especially if they're new in the box from the 80s. That's a good priced one. And I have to throw this in. Remember the Pop Rocks candy? Oh my gosh, they were so much fun to eat. And you sit there and talk while they're popping on your tongue. Simon game, it was really popular. Cabbage Patch dolls. I believe Cabbage Patch started in the late 70s, like around 78, and them can go in the thousands. But if you get some from the 80s, you could probably still sell them for a decent amount, anywhere from 50 to 150, and they really need to be clean or in decent shape. And if you can find one in the box, you can get a couple $100 for them. So look them up when you're out and about, and make sure you're picking them up from the early 80s because they still make them. And then we got electronics like Walkmans and Apple computers and Atari and video games, obviously. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about that. That's just not my side of things. I don't pick up a lot of that. Care Bears were popular. Again, they still make some of them, so you need to make sure that they're from the 80s. Look at the tags, just look them over good and see. Maybe look up some pictures before you go shopping and see what they look like and compare the older ones to the newer ones because they do change over time. And then Pound Puppies, where they're long and flat and they had floppy ears. They're so cute. They're probably not high sellers, but you could probably sell them for $20 or so. And Transformers were popular. The boys love them, and they still sell well. Teddy Ruxpin, he's a good seller. Rainbow Bright, and then we go into like more of the boys' games. Micro Machines, real tiny cars. They were big back then. And Masters of the Universe action figures. If you can find He-Man from back then, you're doing good. And he will sell well. And WWF, the Wrestling Foundation figures, they do well as well. My Little Ponies were popular. Now I can't. I need to find the difference between them because they're stamped different on the bottoms of the hoofs, so you can tell which ones are from the 80s and which ones are not. I can kind of tell, but I still haven't got it down pat, so you might want to research that before you go out shopping because the My Little Ponies from the 80s will do well as the accessories. Pac-Man and Mrs. Pac-Man. Mrs. Pac-Man was popular, and I think it just came out in the 80s. Donkey Kong and Super Mario Brothers. Them are about the only video games that I can talk about that I remember. And Barbie continues to be popular even from the 60s on. But the one thing about Barbies in the 1980s was they came out with their first holiday Barbie back in 1988, and that one has been sought after for a long time because people didn't start collecting until it's been out for a couple years, and then they missed the first one, so the first one's more rare and harder to find. So the first one a couple years ago, it's a blonde. I don't know if they have them in various hair colors, but I can picture the one in blonde hair with a big red dress on, and she sold for like in the couple hundreds. And if your box is in really, really good condition, and then it just goes down depending on the condition of the box. And then now it goes for about $120 or so. So if we picture Back to the Future, the diner was called Cafe 80s. Them are the colors we were talking about earlier, like your turquoise and hot pinks and stuff. So the geometric shapes, and they used a lot of that in home decor, in fashion, in toys, in office supplies, all that type of thing. Then we've got TV shows and movies like Happy Days, Mr. T. What was Mr. T's girlfriend's name? April Fools. Haha. Mr. T was popular. That's where the Mohawks came in for the guys. And Cheers Michael Jackson, Madonna were popular. MTV was popular because we had a lot of rock bands back then, really good rock bands. And Charles and Diana was popular. I know Diana stuff still is, but you have to look it up because they mass produced so much of her stuff. But some of her stuff can still sell for good money. And then we have Magnum PI and E.T. and Rambo. Them were the types of shows that were popular. So if you can find miscellaneous toys, accessories with them movie shows on them, you probably could sell it fairly well. And cars back then were Buick Regal, Grand National was one of my favorites, and the Pontiac Trans Am, and of course the DeLorean from Back to the Future. That one was pretty popular, even though it was an expensive car. So that is about it. One of the other things is if you can find something that says, "Where's the beef?" They came out with all kinds of games and towels and collector's plates and stuff. Does anybody know where "Where's the Beef" came from? What fast food restaurant? Wendy's. If you said it, you're right. So that is it for the 1980s. I hope you dudes, space cadets, and nerds had a good time, and I hope you'll come back and watch more of my videos. And if you do, hit the subscribe button so you can be notified when the next one comes out. Thanks for joining me on this video. Hope you enjoyed the 80s.